The radio crackled, a sound swallowed by the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of rotors that weren't there. Sergeant Marcus Thorne pressed the receiver to his ear, his knuckles white. Below, in the dust-choked valley, his squad was pinned down, the staccato rip of enemy fire echoing off the canyon walls. Concrete and rebar, the bones of a forgotten village, offered the only cover. 3 of his men were already down, their cries lost in the chaos. Command, this is Ghost 6. We are taking heavy fire. I say again, heavy fire. We need air support, now. His voice was a raw tear in the fabric of the battle, desperate and frayed. The reply was a burst of static, a ghost's whisper. Ghost 6, this is command. Air support is unavailable. Nearest asset is 40 minutes out. Can you hold your position? 40 minutes. An eternity. Thorne squeezed his eyes shut. They'd be ghosts for real by then. He looked over at Miller, a kid barely out of basic, who was trying to return fire with a jammed rifle. Fear was a cold sweat on the boy's brow. Damn it, command. Thorne roared into the handset. We don't have 40 minutes. We have maybe 4. Another voice cut through the static, this one calm, measured, and distinctly female. Command, this is Nightshade. I'm 5 mics out. Thorne froze. Nightshade. He'd heard the name, a whisper in the mess hall, a joke among the seasoned pilots. It was the call sign for Warrant Officer Anya Sharma, the only woman flying. The new AH-64X, a prototype Apache helicopter so advanced, so secret, it was practically a myth. They called it the Silent Ghost because of its experimental stealth systems. Most pilots, men who had flown for decades, said the machine was a death trap, too much tech, too little soul. And they said its pilot was a token, a PR stunt. A woman given $1 billion toy she couldn't possibly handle. Thorne had heard the jokes himself. He'd even chuckled at a few. Major Reynolds, a decorated pilot with a chest full of medals and a mouthful of scorn, was the loudest. Pudding. A woman in the Ghost is like handing a Stradivarius to a chimp. He'd sneered over beers just last week. She'll break it before she learns to play a note. Negative. Nightshade. Command's voice was sharp, dismissive. You are not cleared for this engagement. Your craft is not battle-tested. Repeat, you are not. The transmission cut out. Not with static, but with a clean, surgical silence. Thorne stared at his radio, then back at the relentless enemy fire chewing up their cover. 4 minutes. Maybe less. He didn't know it then, but Anya Sharma had just disobeyed a direct order. She had cut her own comms to command, leaving open only a direct, encrypted line to the soldiers on the ground. Her voice, stripped of protocol, came through his earpiece, steady as a surgeon's hand. Ghost 6, this is Nightshade. Talk to me. Where's the fire coming from? Thorne's training, his instinct, his deep-seated skepticism, it all screamed to him to wait for the real air support, to trust the chain of command. But the kid, Miller, was hit. A round had torn through his shoulder, and the boy's face was a mask of shock and pain. Survival instinct took over. They'd dug in on that ridge, Thorne said, his voice tight. Northeast quadrant. 2 heavy machine gun nests, maybe a dozen. Insurgents. Copy that, Ghost 6, Anya's voice replied. There was no tremor, no hesitation. Just a chilling, focus calm. Stay down. I'm painting the target. The next few moments were the longest of Marcus Thorne's life. The enemy fire intensified, a hailstorm of lead that shredded the air. He pulled Miller behind a shattered wall, pressing his own body. Against the boys, a futile shield against the inevitable. He braced for the end, his mind flashing to his daughter's smile, the smell of his wife's hair. He waited for the roar of an A-10 Warthog or the scream of an F-16. He heard nothing. Absolutely nothing. The world went silent. The relentless chatter of the enemy guns just stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. It was unnatural, a vacuum. Thorne risked a glance over the wall. The insurgents on the ridge were looking up, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. And then he saw IT didn't fly over the battlefield. It materialized. One moment, there was only the empty, sun-bleached sky. The next, the AH-64X, was there, hovering less than 200 feet above the ridge. It was a predator carved from shadow, its sleek, angular frame absorbing the light, its rotors turning with a sound so low it was more of a feeling, a pressure in the chest, then a noise. It was utterly, terrifyingly silent. The jokes, the mockery, the image of the chimp with a Stradivarius, it all evaporated in a flash of awe and terror. This was no toy. This was death incarnate. Before the insurgents could even raise their weapons, the ghost opened fire. It wasn't the familiar BRRT of a chain gun. It was a series of soft, pneumatic thumps. Rockets streaked from the wing pods, leaving no smoke trails, just shimmering heat in the air. They struck the machine gun nests with surgical precision, turning rock and metal into silent, expanding blossoms of fire. The dozen insurgents scattered, running for their lives. The ghost's nose-mounted cannon swiveled, tracking them with an eerie, intelligent grace. Short, controlled bursts, no, louder than a nail gun, kicked up dust around the fleeing men. It wasn't killing them. It was hurting them, driving them back, away from the pinned-down squad. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. Then, as silently as it appeared, the helicopter rose, banked, and vanished. It didn't fly away. It just faded. Like a mirage dissolving in the desert heat, Thorne was still on the ground, shielding Miller, his heart hammering against his ribs. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the groans of his wounded men. His radio crackled again. It was Anya. Ghost 6, is your position secure? Are your men safe? Thorne pushed himself up, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Affirmative, Nightshade, he breathed, his voice filled with a reverence he didn't know he possessed. Position secure. You saved us. Just doing my job, Sergeant, she replied, her tone unchanged. Get your men out of there. Command is not going to be happy. He knew she was right. She had broken every rule in the book. She had taken an untested, multi-billion-dollar asset into a hot zone against orders. She had revealed a top-secret weapon system. Major Reynolds would have her wings before she even touched down. But as the medevac chopper finally arrived, its loud, conventional rotors sounding clumsy and ancient, Thorne looked up at the empty sky where the ghost had been. He owed her his life and the lives of his men. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was far from over. Anya Sharma had just made a powerful enemy in Major Reynolds, a man who saw her not as a hero, but as a threat to his world. His ego, and his idea of what a pilot should be. The story of the silent ghost of the valley would spread. But what Thorne didn't know, what no one could have known, was that the silent helicopter was only the beginning. The real war was about to start, not in the dusty canyons of a foreign land, but back on the polished floors of the airbase, where ambition and betrayal were far more dangerous weapons than any rocket. And Anya Sharma, the woman they called Nightshade, was about to find herself in a battle she never trained for, against an enemy she couldn't see. The sound that came next wouldn't be a silent rotor, but the slam of a brig door. The debriefing room was cold, the air scrubbed clean and sterile, a stark contrast to the grit and cordite of the battlefield. Anya Sharma stood at attention, her flight suit still smelling faintly of ozone and adrenaline. Across the polished mahogany table sat a tribunal of ghosts, 3 colonels with faces like stone tablets, and at their center, Major Reynolds. His expression was a mask of triumphant fury. Warrant Officer Sharma, Colonel Hayes began, his voice a low rumble. You are aware that you disobeyed a direct order from command. Yes, sir, Anya said, her voice even, her gaze fixed on the wall behind them. She had learned long ago not to show emotion in rooms like this. Emotion was a weapon they could use against you. You are aware, Reynolds cut in, his voice dripping with condescension, that you took a $2 billion experimental aircraft, an aircraft you were assigned to for testing, not combat, into an active firefight. I am aware that a US Army squad was pinned down and taking casualties, sir, Anya countered, her eyes flicking to meet his. Their air support was 40 minutes out. They had less than 4. I made a judgment call. A judgment call. Reynolds scoffed, leaning forward. His medals gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. You are a test pilot, Sharma. A glorified mechanic with a joystick. You are not an operator. You do not get to make judgment calls that endanger national security assets. The words were designed to sting, to diminish her. Glorified mechanic. It was the same language he'd used for months, ever since she'd been selected for the Ghost program over him. Reynolds, with his perfect flight record and his political connections, had been the shoe-in. He was the golden boy, the face of the air cavalry. Her selection had been an insult he couldn't stomach. He'd made her life a living hell, whispering in the right ears, questioning her every move, painting her as an unqualified diversity hire. My actions saved the lives of 6 American soldiers, Major, Anya stated, keeping her voice level. Your actions exposed our most advanced stealth technology to the enemy. Reynolds slammed his hand on the table, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the silent room. For all we know, their satellites were tracking you. For all we know, you just handed the Russians and the Chinese the keys to the kingdom because you wanted to play hero. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It was a lie, and they all knew it. The Ghost stealth systems were designed to defeat satellite tracking. But the truth didn't matter in this room. Perception did. And Reynolds was painting a picture of a reckless, emotional woman who couldn't be trusted with the Army's shiniest toy. Colonel Hayes cleared his throat. Warrant officer, your flight privileges are revoked, effective immediately. You are confined to base, pending a full investigation. You will not go near the AH-64X. You will not speak to anyone about the events of Mission 7 Charlie. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Anya said, the words tasting like ash. She was dismissed with a curt nod. As she turned to leave, Reynolds's voice followed her, a low, venomous whisper meant only for her. Should have been me. A real pilot would have known his place. The next few weeks were a special kind of torment. Anya was a ghost on her own base. Pilots she had once shared jokes with now averted their eyes. The mechanics who had worked alongside her on the Ghost, who had marveled at her intuitive understanding of its complex systems, now gave her curt, professional nods and nothing more. The whispers followed her everywhere, in the mess hall, gym, the barracks. She cracked under pressure. She's a liability. She's going to get court-martialed. The cage was invisible, but its bars were made of suspicion and scorn. Her world, once as vast as the sky, had shrunk to the size of this dusty airbase. The Ghost, her ghost, sat in a locked, climate-controlled hangar, a sleeping beast she was forbidden to approach. Reynolds, she learned, had been assigned as its new primary pilot. The irony was a bitter pill. He, who had called the machine a death trap, was now the one holding the keys. One evening, unable to sleep, Anya was in the base library, burying herself in aerospace engineering manuals, the only place she could feel close to her craft. A shadow fell over her table. It was Sergeant Marcus Thorne. He looked awkward, out of place among the shelves of books, his uniform still bearing. The faint dust of the field, he said, his voice low. Got a minute? Anya looked up, surprised. No one from Ghost 6 had been allowed to speak to her. The official report, she knew, had been sanitized. It would say that a classified aerial asset had provided support. Her name would be nowhere near it. Sergeant, she said, closing her book. You shouldn't be here. You'll get in trouble. With all due respect, I've been in real trouble. This isn't it, he said, pulling up a chair. My men, they're all safe. Miller's going to make a full recovery. They wanted me to thank you. We know what you did. What you risked. Anya felt a crack in her carefully constructed armor. I was just doing my job, Thorne. No, you did more than that, he insisted, his eyes earnest. You did what was right. And Reynolds. He's twisting it. He's telling everyone you panicked, that you almost compromised the mission. He's lying. It doesn't matter what he's saying, Anya said, her voice tight. He's a major with a spotless record. I'm a warrant officer with a history of creative interpretations of protocol. It was true. Anya had always pushed the envelope. In flight school, she'd mastered maneuvers her instructors had deemed impossible. As a Kiowa pilot in her early years, she'd developed unconventional reconnaissance tactics that, while effective, had ruffled the feathers of her more by-the-book superiors. She had a reputation for being brilliant, but also for being a maverick. It was a reputation Reynolds was now using as a weapon against her. Thorne leaned closer. There's something else. The day you saved us, the enemy fire was too accurate, too coordinated. They knew our position, our numbers. It felt wrong, like they were waiting for us. Anya frowned. A leak? From inside? That's what I've been thinking, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And now Reynolds is in charge of the Ghost. the most advanced surveillance and data gathering machine on the planet. If there's a traitor on this base, that's the asset they'd want to control. A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, planted itself in Anya's mind. Could Reynolds's ambition go beyond just grounding her? Was his obsession with piloting the Ghost about more than just ego? The thought was chilling. He was a decorated officer, a patriot, but he was also a man consumed by pride and resentment. There's no way to prove it, Anya said, shaking her head. He's got everyone convinced I'm the problem. Maybe, Thorne said, standing up. He slid a small, folded piece of paper across the table. But I made a copy of my squad's unedited helmet cam footage from that day. The audio is crystal clear. It's got my call to command, their denial of support, and your voice, calm as can be, coming to the rescue. It's the truth. Maybe it's time someone else heard it. He walked away, leaving Anya staring at the small, folded square. It was a dangerous piece of evidence. If she used it, she could be court-martialed for sure. But if Thorne was right, if there was a traitor on the base and Reynolds was somehow involved, then her being grounded was the least of their problems. The Ghost, in the wrong hands, wasn't just a weapon. It was a key that could unlock every secret the US military possessed. That night, Anya lay in her bunk, the folded paper clutched in her hand. The whispers outside her door seemed to grow louder, more menacing. She was trapped, grounded, and discredited. Reynolds had won. He was in the cockpit of her machine, soaring through the skies she was forbidden to enter. But as she stared into the darkness, a new resolve began to harden within her. Reynolds thought he had caged her. He thought he had won by taking her wings. He didn't understand. He had taken away the pilot, but he'd left the engineer, the tactician, the warrior. He had grounded Anya Sharma, but he had just awakened Nightshade. She had to get back in that cockpit. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because she was starting to believe that the lives of more than just one squad were at stake. She had to know what Reynolds was really doing with her Ghost. The first step was to get past the guards at the hangar. The second was to bypass the state-of-the-art security systems she herself had helped design. The third, and most dangerous, was to take the silent Ghost up into the air without anyone on the base knowing. It was impossible. It was insane. It was a suicide mission, and as she slipped out of her bunk and into the moonless night, she knew it was the only option she had left. But what she couldn't possibly know was that someone was watching her, an unseen eye tracking her every move. The cage of whispers had a hidden door, and she was about to step through it into a much larger, and far more lethal, trap. The hangar was a cathedral of shadows and steel. Hangar 17. The Ghost's lair. Anya moved through the darkness like a wraith, her footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. She had spent more hours in this building than in her own barracks, memorizing every corner, every conduit, every blind spot in the security camera coverage. She knew its rhythms, the hum of the climate control, the precise moment the guards on the night shift changed their patrol routes. Getting inside had been the easy part. A service duct, a loosened grate, and a 30-foot drop into a maintenance shaft. The hard part was the silent beast that sat in the center of the hangar, bathed in the soft glow of emergency lighting. The AH-64X. Her Ghost. Even powered down, it felt alive, radiating a latent energy that made the hairs on her arm stand up. She ran a hand along its fuselage, the composite material cool and smooth beneath her fingertips. It felt like coming home. But there was no time for sentiment. Thorne's warning echoed in her mind. If there's a traitor on this base, that's the asset they'd want to control. She slipped into the cockpit, the familiar scent of electronics and kerosene enveloping her. The seat mold around her, a perfect fit. Her hands moved with muscle memory, flipping a series of switches in a sequence known only to her and the lead design engineer, the emergency maintenance override. The canopy hissed shut, sealing her inside a bubble of soundproof, reinforced glass. The cockpit displays flickered to life, bathing her face in a soft, blue light. She wasn't here to fly it. Not yet. She was here to listen. Anya plugged a small, encrypted data drive into a port hidden beneath the main console. This was her back door. During the final stages of the Ghost software development, she had embedded a diagnostic tool, a Ghost program of her own, that recorded every system, command, every flight path, every data transmission the helicopter made. It was an unauthorized addition, a failsafe she had created, telling herself it was for tracking performance glitches. Now, she knew it was for this. The drive began to pull the data from the Ghost's black box. Flight logs, comms recordings, sensor data from the last 3 weeks, everything since Reynolds had taken over. As the files downloaded, her eyes scanned the flight logs. Reynolds had been flying the Ghost almost daily. But the flight paths were odd. They weren't training, exercises, or standard patrol routes. They were long, circuitous flights over remote, uninhabited sectors of the desert. He was flying at night, at low altitude, with the Ghost stealth systems fully engaged. He was going somewhere he didn't want to be seen. Then the comms logs loaded. Most were encrypted military channels, standard procedure. But there were several encrypted bursts on a non-standard frequency, transmitted to a civilian satellite network. It was a Ghost frequency, almost impossible to trace. Almost. Anya had designed the Ghost's comm suite. She knew its secrets. She initiated a decryption sequence. As the algorithm worked, she pulled up the sensor data from his flights. The Ghost sensor suite was the most powerful in the world. It could read a license plate from 50,000 feet. It could track a cell phone signal, listen in on conversations, and map an entire city's power grid. Reynolds had been using it extensively, but he wasn't pointing it at enemy positions. He was pointing it at his own base. Anya's blood ran cold. She watched as the Ghost sensor data painted a picture of the last 3 weeks. Reynolds had been systematically mapping the base's entire security network. Power lines, comms, junctions, guard schedules, the personal cell phone data of high-ranking officers. He was using the most advanced intelligence gathering tool ever created to spy on his own people. The question was, why? Was he looking for the leak Thorne suspected? Or was he the leak? The decryption program chimed softly. The Ghost frequency. Transmissions were unlocked. Anya opened the first file. It wasn't a voice recording. It was a data packet. A compressed file containing everything she had just seen. The maps of the base's security, the surveillance data, the personal information. Of the colonels on her tribunal. Reynolds wasn't just collecting this information. He was sending it to someone. Anya's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. This was proof. Thorne was right. But who was on the other end of that transmission? She opened the second file. This one was audio. A voice, electronically distorted but clear enough to understand, spoke in clipped, precise English. The package is clean. The buyer is satisfied. Payment has been transferred to the usual account. Your next target is the convoy. Sector Gamma 7, 0400 hours, Thursday. You will provide aerial surveillance and data relay. Do not engage. Your asset is too valuable to risk. Just watch and report. Convoy. Anya's mind raced. She scanned the base's mission logs. There was a convoy scheduled for Thursday at 0400. It was a supply run, but it had a special cargo. The first field deployment of the new Hydra network jammer, a revolutionary piece of tech that could shut down an entire enemy army's communications grid. It was a game changer, and someone wanted to know its exact location. The third file was the final piece of the puzzle. It was Reynolds's voice, clear and steady. The transfer is complete. The intel on the Hydra convoy will cost them. My price is non-negotiable. Full access to the Ghost source code and a clean exit. When this is done, I'm gone. Betrayal. It was a cold, hard knot in Anya's stomach. Reynolds wasn't just a bitter, ambitious pilot. He was a traitor, selling out his country, his fellow soldiers, for money and access to her technology. His obsession with the Ghost wasn't about pride. It was about greed. He wanted to own it, to sell its secrets to the highest bidder. Her grounding, the tribunal, the whispers. It was all a calculated plan to get her out of the way so he could have unfettered access to the aircraft. He had used her heroic act to paint her as a reckless liability, clearing the way for his own treason. Anya copied the files onto her drive. She had to get this to someone. Colonel Hayes, maybe. The Inspector General. Someone, anyone, who would believe her. But as she reached to power down the console, a new file appeared on the screen. It was a live data stream. From the Ghost's own external sensors, someone was in the hangar with her. Anya froze, her hand hovering over the console. The sensor display showed a heat signature near the main hangar door. 2 of them. They were moving slowly, methodically, sweeping the area with thermal images. They weren't the regular night shift guards. Their movements were too professional, too precise. They were hunters. Her blood turned to ice. They knew she was here. Had she tripped a silent alarm? Or had they been waiting for her? Then, a voice crackled in the cockpit's external speakers, bypassing her soundproof canopy. It was Reynolds. "Did you really think it would be that easy, Sharma?" His voice was laced with a smug, chilling amusement. "Did you think you could just walk in here and take back my bird? I designed a few back doors of my own." On the screen, she saw a new icon appear, a remote access protocol. Reynolds was locking her out of the Ghost systems. One by one, the cockpit displays went dark. The power died. She was trapped in the cockpit, a prisoner in her own machine. "You've been a thorn in my side from the beginning," Reynolds' voice continued, echoing in the cavernous hangar. "But you've also been useful. You took the fall, and now you've gathered all the evidence of my little side business in one convenient place. Saves me the trouble of deleting it myself." The two heat signatures were approaching the helicopter. They weren't soldiers. They were mercenaries, private military contractors, their gear top of the line, their weapons silenced. Anya's mind raced, searching for an option, any option. She was unarmed, locked in a powered-down helicopter, with two trained killers closing in. Reynolds had played her perfectly. He had anticipated her every move. This wasn't just about stopping her. It was an execution. No one would question the story. The disgraced pilot, obsessed with her old machine, breaks into the hangar and is killed in a tragic accident. The canopy lock hissed, the sound of a tomb being sealed. Reynolds was locking her in. "Don't worry, Anya," his voice crooned, the sound sickeningly intimate. "I'll take good care of your ghost. We have a convoy to watch." The mercenaries were at the base of the cockpit now, their rifles raised. She could see the red dots of their laser sights dancing on the reinforced glass. They wouldn't be able to shoot through it, but they didn't need to. One of them was placing a small, magnetic charge on the canopy hinge. She was out of time. She had the proof that could stop a traitor and save a crucial military asset, but she was about to die with it, locked in a metal coffin. As the small, red light on the explosive charge began to blink, Anya saw only one, desperate, insane way out. It was a 1-in-a-million shot, a maneuver that existed only in simulations, a move so dangerous it could tear the ghost, and her, too, pieces. But it was the only move she had left. But the machine was dead. How could she possibly fly a dead bird? The answer wasn't in the engines, but in the battery. The emergency power cell, just enough juice for one last, desperate act. The question was, would it be enough? The red light on the charge blinked faster. 3 seconds. 2. Anya's hands flew across the dead console, her fingers finding a small, recessed panel below the main throttle. The manual battery release. It was a relic, a mechanical override, insisted upon by old-school engineers who didn't trust modern electronics. A last-ditch system designed to give a pilot just enough power to eject if the main systems failed. But the Ghost didn't have an ejection seat. The cockpit was a reinforced survival cell. The override had been repurposed. Anya had been the one to do it. She had linked it not to an ejection seat, but to the rotor clutch and the hydraulic actuators. She called it the Phoenix Protocol, a way to bring the bird back from the dead for just a few seconds. 1 second. She slammed her palm onto the panel. The world exploded in a flash of white light as the charge on the canopy detonated. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed but held, the force of the blast shaking the entire 4-ton machine. Alarms, shrill and desperate, screamed to life as 24 volts of raw power surged from the emergency battery directly into the Ghost heart. The cockpit displays flickered on, red with warning icons. Hydraulic failure. Engine offline. Rotor clutch engaged. The two mercenaries, momentarily blinded by the blast, stumbled back. Below her, Anya heard Reynolds' voice, sharp with surprise and anger. "What is she doing? Take her down." The Ghost's massive rotor blades, which should have required a 10-minute engine spool-up, lurched into motion. There was no silent, graceful spin. This was a brutal, mechanical act of violence. The emergency power bypassed the engines, dumping every last joule of energy directly into the transmission. The sound was a horrific shriek of protesting metal, a groan from the depths of the machine as it was forced to do something it was never designed to do. The mercenaries opened fire, their rifles spitting uselessly against the armored cockpit. Anya ignored them. Her eyes were locked on the displays. She had maybe 10 seconds of power before the battery was completely drained. 10 seconds to save her own life. With a final, deafening crack, the rotor blades caught. The entire helicopter leaped into the air, not with the controlled liftoff, a normal takeoff, but with the convulsive, uncontrolled jump of a wounded animal. It shot 10 feet straight up, the landing skids clearing the mercenaries' heads by inches. The hangar doors were closed. She was trapped, but Anya wasn't aiming for the doors. She slammed the cyclic stick hard to the left. The Ghost, its hydraulic systems failing and its computers screaming in protest, responded sluggishly. It tilted, a groaning, dying beast, and swung its tail boom around like a club. The two mercenaries had nowhere to run. The carbon fiber tail rotor, spinning with just enough momentum to be lethal, swept across the hangar floor. One man went down, his weapon clattering across the concrete. The other dove out of the way, rolling behind a stack of equipment crates. 0.8 seconds of power left. Reynolds was screaming into his radio. "She's in the air. I want that hangar locked down. Scramble the response team. Shoot her down if you have to." The Ghost shuddered, its rotor slowing, the battery indicator on Anya's screen flashing a critical red. It was dying. She was a sitting duck. The remaining mercenary was back on his feet, leveling his rifle at the cockpit. Anya's eyes darted around the hangar, her mind working faster than it ever had before. There was no way out. The main doors were sealed. The roof was reinforced concrete. It was over, and then she saw it. High on the far wall, behind the gantry crane, was the hangar's main ventilation shaft. It was 20 feet wide, covered by a simple set of industrial louvers, thin aluminum, designed to keep the rain out, not to stop a 4-ton attack helicopter. It was an insane target. A needle to thread in a dying machine. 0.5 seconds. "You're not getting away, Sharma." Reynolds's voice echoed around her. "Watch me," Anya whispered, her knuckles white on the controls. She pulled the collective, feeding the last dregs of power to the rotors. The Ghost gave a final, shuddering lurch, gaining another 20 feet of altitude. It was just enough. She kicked the rudder pedal, pointing the helicopter's nose at the vent. The mercenary fired, his bullet sparking against the glass. 0.3 seconds. The Ghost drifted forward, clumsy and unresponsive. It felt like trying to steer a falling building. The rotor tips were inches from the hangar walls. A single mistake, a single miscalculation, and the blades would strike concrete, sending the Ghost into a death spiral. 0.2 seconds. The nose of the helicopter smashed through the aluminum louvers, the sound of tearing metal screaming through the hangar. Dust and debris filled the air. For a moment, the Ghost was wedged, half in, half out of the wall, 100 feet above the ground. 0.1 second. The battery died. The displays went black. The rotors, now just spinning from momentum, began to slow. The Ghost, its brief, violent rebirth over, started to fall. It slid backward, out of the vent, back into the hangar. It was over. She had failed, but as the helicopter began to drop, Anya did the one thing her pursuers never expected. She hit the landing skid release. With the last of the hydraulic pressure, the skids deployed. It wasn't enough to land, but it was enough to change the machine's center of gravity. The nose of the Ghost dipped forward. Instead of sliding backward, it tipped, falling through the hole she had made in the wall for a terrifying second. She was falling, tumbling through the night air. Then, the Ghost slammed onto the roof of the adjacent building, the impact so violent it knocked the breath from her lungs. Metal screamed, the fuselage buckled, but the reinforced cockpit cell held. She was alive. She was outside, below. The base was erupting into chaos. Sirens blared, floodlights swept the sky. She could hear the sound of approaching vehicles, the shouts of the quick response force. Reynolds would have them here in minutes. Anya forced the shattered canopy open and scrambled out of the cockpit, the encrypted data drive clutched in her hand. The Ghost was a wreck, a broken bird that would never fly again. A wave of grief washed over her, sharp and painful. She had saved her life, but she had been forced to destroy the one thing she loved most. There was no time for mourning. She had the proof. She had to get it to someone in power. But who could she trust? Reynolds had eyes and ears everywhere. The entire base was now hunting her. She was the enemy, a rogue pilot who had stolen and crashed a multi-billion-dollar aircraft. She scrambled to the edge of the roof, peering down into the darkness. The drop was 50 feet. In the distance, she could see the lights of the base's main gate, 2 miles away. It was an impossible run. Then, her radio, the small, personal radio on her vest, crackled to life. It was an encrypted channel. Nightshade, do you read me? It was Thorn. Thorn? How did you? No time. His voice was urgent. They're not just trying to catch you. The order just came down from Reynolds. You've been designated a hostile threat. They've been ordered to shoot on sight. You need to get off that roof, now. Anya's stomach tightened. Reynolds wasn't just trying to silence her. He was trying to erase her. Where do I go? She asked, her voice low. The whole base is a kill box. There was a pause. Then Thorn's voice came back, steady and resolved. You don't go anywhere. You hold your position. We are coming to you. We? Anya asked, confused. Thorn, your squad is on lockdown. You can't help me. We're not on lockdown anymore, he said, and for the first time, Anya heard something else in his voice. It wasn't just a soldier. It was a leader. You saved us in that valley. We don't leave our people behind. Look to the east. Anya turned, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. At first, she saw nothing. Then, a single, flickering light. It grew brighter, closer. It was a vehicle, moving fast, its headlights off. It wasn't a military Humvee. It was a civilian truck. As it got closer, she could see figures in the back. It was Ghost 6. Her squad. They had broken out of their barracks, stolen a vehicle, and were driving headlong into the heart of the storm to save the pilot who had. Save them, but as the truck sped toward her, a new sound cut through the night. It was the deep, menacing whomp 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 of helicopter rotors. Not a silent ghost this time. This was a pair of standard AH-64 Apaches, the base's security patrol, their running lights dark, their weapons pods armed. And they were moving to intercept the truck. Reynolds was cutting off her only escape. Anya stood on the edge of the roof, the wind whipping at her flight suit, the data drive a cold weight in her hand. She was caught between the hunters on the ground and the predators in the sky. She had the truth, but it was worthless if she died before she could tell it. The Apaches were lining up for a gun run on the truck. Thorn and his men were about to be wiped out, all because of her. She had to do something, but what? She was exposed, unarmed, and her only weapon was a broken wreck behind her. Or was it? The Phoenix Protocol was a one-shot deal, but what if? There was one last echo in the machine? One last, desperate whisper from her ghost. The two Apaches bank hard, their silhouettes like sharks against the moonlit clouds. Their target was the lone, speeding truck carrying Ghost 6. Anya watched in horror, her mind calculating the grim physics of the encounter. A single burst from a 30mm cannon would turn that truck into a flaming coffin. Thorn and his men were sacrificing themselves for her, and she was about to watch them die. Thorn, get out of there. She screamed into her radio. It's a trap. Abort. Negative, Nightshade. Thorn's voice came back, impossibly calm amidst the rising tension. We knew the risk. Just be ready. Ready for what? She had nothing left. The ghost behind her was a corpse of wire and metal. Its battery was dead, its systems fried. But as the lead Apache's nose dipped, preparing for the attack, an idea sparked in Anya's mind, a desperate, suicidal gamble based on a single, overlooked detail. The ghost's targeting system. It was powered by a separate, isolated capacitor, designed to hold a target lock even if the helicopter lost all power. It held a charge for exactly 90 seconds after a catastrophic shutdown. It was a sliver of a chance, a ghost of a ghost. She scrambled back into the wrecked cockpit. The stench of burned electronics was overwhelming. The displays were dark, the controls dead. But her hands, guided by pure instinct, found the manual targeting controls. On the side of the cyclic stick, she rested her thumb on the small, cool metal of the laser designator button. She had no way of knowing if the capacitor still held a charge. She had no way of aiming, no screens, no HUD. She would have to do it blind, using her memory of the sky, her intuition as a pilot. She closed her eyes, picturing the battlefield in her mind. The lead Apache was at 10 o'clock, descending. The second was high, at 7 o'clock, providing cover. She took a deep breath, forcing the adrenaline and fear into a single point of focus. Okay, you bastards, she whispered, her thumb pressing down on the button. Let's see who the real ghost is. A tiny, almost imperceptible green light flickered on the stick. The capacitor had held. A silent, invisible laser beam, no thicker than a pencil, shot out from the ghost's nose, slicing through the darkness. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. A faint vibration through the frame of the dead machine on the instrument panel of the lead Apache. A single, terrifying warning light began to flash. Laser designation. Missile lock imminent. The pilot, a man named Corman who had shared a beer with Reynolds just the night before, swore in surprise. Where the hell did that come from? He barked to his gunner. Are we being painted? His gunner's screen was a mess of static. I don't know. All my systems are. Wait. The signal is coming from the crash site. From the ghost. That's impossible, Corman snapped. It's a wreck. But the warning light was insistent. His training took over. A laser designation meant one thing. A Hellfire missile was about to turn his multi-million-dollar aircraft into a cloud of shrapnel. He broke off his attack on the truck, yanking his collective and sending the Apache soaring upward, deploying flares in a panic. The second Apache pilot, seeing his wingman break off and pop flares, followed suit. He had no idea what was happening, only that his leader had been spooked by something unseen, something terrifying. The two helicopters, the apex predators of the sky, were now circling cautiously, their attention ripped away from the truck and fixed on the impossible threat of the dead helicopter on the roof. It was the opening Thorne needed. The truck screeched to a halt at the base of the building. Nightshade, now, he yelled. Anya didn't hesitate. She holstered the laser designator, grabbed a coil of emergency rope from the ghost survival kit, and rappelled down the side of the building, landing hard on the dusty ground. Hands grabbed her, pulling her into the back of the truck. Go! Thorne roared. The truck fishtailed, spraying gravel, and sped off into the night, away from the confused helicopter pilots and the swarming ground forces. As they raced toward the base's perimeter fence, Anya looked back. She saw Major Reynolds's vehicle arrive at the crash site. He stood there, bathed in the headlights, staring up at the wrecked ghost, then in the direction of their fleeing truck. Even from a distance, she could feel the heat of his rage. He had been outmaneuvered, his perfect trap sprung, but the game wasn't over. As they approached the fence, another figure stepped out into the road, blocking their path. It was Colonel Hayes. He stood alone, his hand raised, a silent command to stop. Thorne slammed on the brakes. It's the Colonel. What do we do? Stop, Anya said, her voice steady. She trusted her gut, and her gut told her this was the endgame. She climbed out of the truck, the data drive in her hand, and walked toward the man who had grounded her. Colonel, she said, coming to a halt 10 feet from him. Warrant Officer Sharma, Hayes said, his face unreadable in the dim light. You've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight. I have evidence, sir, Anya said, holding up the drive. Evidence of treason. Major Reynolds is selling classified intel. He orchestrated an ambush on Ghost 6 and was about to sell the location of the Hydra convoy. Reynolds's voice crackled over Hayes's radio, loud enough for Anya to hear. Sir, she's lying. She's a traitor who destroyed government property. I'm ordering you to apprehend her. Hayes didn't look at his radio. His eyes were locked on Anya's. And I'm supposed to believe you? A disgraced pilot who just committed a dozen felonies. This was the moment. The final test. Anya looked him straight in the eye. No, sir. You're supposed to believe him. She pointed back at the truck. Sergeant Thorne stepped out, followed by the rest of his squad. They stood together, a silent, defiant line of soldiers. Sergeant Thorne and his men are witnesses, Anya said. They were there. They know what happened in that valley. And they know who saved them. Hayes was silent for a long moment, the entire base holding its breath around them. The two Apaches still circled overhead. Reynolds's ground team was approaching fast. Then, the colonel slowly raised his radio to his lips. Major Reynolds. He said, his voice like cold steel. You and your men will stand down. I say again, stand down. You are to report to my office, under guard. You are being relieved of your command, pending an investigation into treason. A wave of disbelief, then pure, unadulterated fury, came from the radio. You're taking the word of a hysterical woman over a decorated officer? I will not stand down. I will. Hayes cut him off. Major, If your forces do not stand down in the next 10 seconds, I will authorize the pilots above me to treat you as a hostile target. The choice is yours." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, the approaching vehicle stopped. The hunt was over in the end. It was the helmet cam footage from Thorne's squad, combined with the data on Anya's drive, that sealed Reynolds' fate. The money trail was discovered, the foreign buyers identified. His betrayal ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. He hadn't just sold intel, he had been feeding the enemy tactical information for years, all to fund a lavish lifestyle and feed an ego that couldn't stand being second best. His downfall was poetic justice. He was brought down by the very soldier he tried to destroy, using the technology he coveted. Weeks later, Anya stood in Hangar 17 once more. The wrecked Ghost was gone, but in its place sat a brand new AH-64X, gleaming under the lights. Colonel Hayes stood beside her. "The tribunal has cleared you of all charges, warrant officer," he said. "In fact, they've awarded you the Distinguished Flying Cross for your actions in the valley." Anya looked at the new helicopter. It was perfect, but it wasn't her Ghost. And Major Reynolds. "He'll spend the rest of his life in a place where he can't hurt anyone else," Hayes said. He handed her a small, velvet box. Inside was the medal. The Silent Ghost program was almost scrapped after this, but Sergeant Thorne and his men made a very compelling case to the Joint Chiefs. They said that the machine is only as good as the pilot flying it, and that there's only one pilot they trust. Anya looked from the medal to the helicopter, and finally to the colonel. "When do I start?" Hayes smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Your bird is waiting, Nightshade. Welcome back to the sky." As Anya climbed into the cockpit of her new Ghost, the familiar feeling of coming home washed over her. She had been mocked, grounded, and hunted. She had lost her machine and almost lost her life. But she had fought back, not with weapons, but with ingenuity, courage, and an unbreakable resolve. She had earned her place, not because someone had given it to her, but because she had taken it. Her hands moved over the controls, the displays flickering to life. She initiated the pre-flight check, her voice, now confident and clear, echoing in the quiet hangar. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a guardian, a silent protector. The whispers had been silenced, replaced by a quiet respect that was louder than any medal. But as she prepared for takeoff, a final, encrypted message flashed on her screen. It was from a source she didn't recognize, a ghost in the global network. It contained only a set of coordinates, deep in uncharted territory, and a single, chilling question. He wasn't working alone. Ready for the next hunt. Anya looked at the message, then out at the vast, open sky. The war she had won was just a single battle. The real enemy was still out there, hidden in the shadows. A slow, determined smile touched her lips. She keyed her response, a single word that would echo through the silent corners of the world, always. The canopy hissed shut, and the silent Ghost rose, not with a roar, but with a whisper, vanishing into the night. The hunt had just begun.